Over 100 years ago, Samuel Hahnemann wrote in his Organon, which has had over 50 editions and has circulated in all the countries of the world and in all languages, and which has been the fountainhead upon the effects of drugs and other substances upon the healthy human body, that all persons were not affected by a medicine in an equally great degree. On the contrary, there is vast variance in this respect according to the patient or subject, the amount of the dose, the sensitiveness or the irritableness of same. He says in section 129 of this work that unknown medicines even of mildest nature will produce symptoms if tested by sensitive persons. In section 117, he speaks of idiosyncrasies, by which are meant peculiar constitutions which, though otherwise healthy, possess a disposition to be brought into a more or less morbid state by certain things which seem to produce no impression or changes in many other individuals. To this he adds a note as follows: some persons are apt to faint from smell of roses and to fall into many other morbid and sometimes dangerous states from partaking of mussels, crabs and fish raw, or from touching the leaves of same kind of sumac rus. Kent notes that certain subjects cannot take opium because of dangerous congestions arising even from the smallest doses, as occurred many times in his practice. He also cites that quinine made some alarmingly sick. While one would take 15 grains and have no symptoms, another would suffer from quininism even from a small dose. He noted also that lavender flowers produced coryza in one. In another, the eating of peaches always produced diarrhea. He regarded a craving for salt as a distinctive symptom of psoric or tubercular diathesis. Susceptibility, said Finke in 1865, serves as the diagnostic principle and depends upon what the assimilability of medicines. Dr. Samuel Swan and Dr. Thomas Wilday of New York and Dr. P.P. Wells of Brooklyn and many others in the latter 70s reported many cases of supersensitiveness to various foods, among which was a case where common garden celery when eaten produced itching, changing locality frequently and other disagreeable symptoms. Apium graveolens, celery in a high potency, removed the condition and permitted the patient to ever afterward eating celery with no untoward effects. People exist who cannot eat strawberries. These susceptible individuals suffer from urticarial rashes, sometimes difficulty in breathing as if a weight were on the chest. Potentized Fragaria vesca relieved at once. This was first advocated perhaps by Dr. W. P. Wesselhoff of Boston and employ verified by Dr. Swan and Wells. The writer used it successfully in case having similar symptoms whenever strawberries, of which she was most fond, were eaten. Fragaria vesca in a high potency not only removed the condition but so completely that the patient was ever after able to eat strawberries without symptoms for the remainder of her life, which ended some 30 years subsequent. There are numerous cases of oversusceptibility to apis poisoning, which is remedied by taking apis in minimum doses. Beekeepers and those who handle bees are rendered immune and do not mind or suffer from bee stings, nor do they produce swelling or edema when the person is thus immunized. Von Pirquet introduced a term that is modern, allergy. It would almost seem that the author had been delving into the homeopathic literature of 18th and 19th centuries and that he was familiar with the classical work of the learned Reichenbach entitled Der sensitive Mensch. Let us go over the definitions. Allergy is a condition of unusual or exaggerated specific susceptibility to a substance which is harmless to a majority of persons given in a like amounts and under the like conditions. Examples: fish, berries, egg white and various foods producing symptoms such as urticaria, nausea, vomiting, pains, purging, migraines, asthmatic attacks and many other symptoms of various natures. Drugs and medicines that would be borne by the majority, would produce allergic symptoms and even toxic manifestation in those specifically sensitive. This food and drug allergy is probably more extensively present than in ordinarily known and may first show itself at childhood and continue through life unless corrected. The symptom may also embrace urticaria, angioneurotic edema, intestinal edema, etc. Hypersensitivity. This is defined as having ability to react with characteristic symptoms to the application or contact with certain substances, allergens, in amount innocuous to normal individuals. Hypersensibility. Abnormal susceptibility to poisons, infections, entirely innocuous to normal individuals. Anaphylaxis. Unusual or exaggerated susceptibility to a foreign protein. Taraxi. Novice term for anaphylaxis. Atopy. Hereditary disposition to sensitiveness. The work on modern medicine gives long list of allergic diseases as to their causations and cure, and to review a few may not be amiss. Thus, asthma is said to be 40% allergic in origin, hay fever, vasomotor rhinitis, and this is often produced by such drugs as quinine, aspirin, the great quack remedy, ipecac, iodine, morphine, etc. Serum disease is an allergic reaction characterized by skin symptoms, enlargement of lymph nodes, fever, and polyarthritis. Urticaria is not uncommon following blood infusion, etc. Eruptions, gastrointestinal disturbances, respiratory affections are noticed in the latest textbooks, and we read that collapse may ensue from ingestion of smallest dose of things to which the patient is susceptible, says Rosenew. We homeopaths call them aggravations, and as contrariwise they may be beneficial, so we denominate them as ameliorations. In most cases, this sensitiveness is inherited, though it may be acquired. The fault is not in the food but in the person, says Rosenew. We have for more than a century called it constitutional. Then, according to the same authority, he recommends, in order to relieve this, the use of allergen, which should be given in minute amount, so small that it just short of producing symptoms. Could anything be more homeopathic? It has ever been a cardinal requirement that a remedy applied on homeopathic or curative grounds should be given in quantities to stimulate nature's defense or remove them, in other words, instead of producing more symptoms. Dr. Dickmars advocates the use of permanganates of potash in snake bites in a 1 to 2000 solutions, which sounds rather homeopathic. This tissue hypersensitivity or allergy, as is now on medical tablets, is found in most, if not all, tuberculinics and furnishes a soil for the tubercular germ, and exists in what might be termed canceronics, or those having a trend towards the growth but as yet no tumor. There is a long list of disturbing foods. The symptoms of these are found in our repertories. Our aggravations and ameliorations are founded upon a scientific basis, which the allopathic school is just beginning to recognize. Severity of these allergic manifestations to be determined by constitutional symptoms. They may at times be fulgurating and even produce death. This is the case of special susceptibility to special poisons, for we read of ergotism, letharism, or even solanism from eating oat sprouty potatoes. This susceptibility underlies contagion and cure, so that cause and cure knock at the same door. Atropine produces an eruption like scarlet fever, says in 1931 edition of a popular work, Allopathic on Practice. The writer must have been reading some work of Hahnemann published in 100 years ago, before atropine was known, but belladonna, where it is found, as well known and used remedy then, and has been one of our best scarlet fever remedies ever since. It dilates the pupil today as it did then. The so-called regular school of medicine looks upon anything it can gather from homeopathic sources as its lawful spoil, wrote Dr. George A. Dewey in 1878. One of the methods for determining the sensitivity of a person to a various allergens is that the skin test, which is made by applying them scratches on the arm or some part of the body and noting the irritation that may or may not come. These pollen and protein extracts are furnished by any pharmacological concern, and the more the better. We read in one of the ads that a good wide forearm would accommodate 8 to 10 rows of these scratches and from 24 to 30 tests. It is difficult to conceive the value of such testing where 24 to 30 different substances are tested at the same time. It is worse than polypharmacy, for to obtain the action of 30 drugs given at the same time would confuse results, often antidotal, and be not only ridiculous but absolutely asinine. It has, however, furnished grist for the pharmacologist whose advertisement now relate to allergy and allergens. It has finished with endocrines and hormones and played upon the stings of the vitamins. Anything new is for popular consumption, else the drugless drugstores could not exist. There is so-called modern conception, but by no means a new one, that this allergy can be removed by giving minute doses of same allergen that is the causing factor. The homeopathic physician not only smiles at the idea but also at the dose minuteness that is advocated for the purpose, as it easily embraces the domain of infinitesimal. If we will go back into the form of this medication, we will see plainly that it corresponds very closely to what was called by our forefathers isopathy, an offshoot from homeopathy. Dr. Samuelson of New York very aptly put forth the difference between isopathy and homeopathy. Thus, isopathy would give raw cucumbers to a person made sick by eating cucumbers and would make him worse. Homeopathy would give him cucumis in high potency and not only cure the patient but also enable him to eat cucumbers with no more untoward symptoms. Rosenew, as stated, advocates and praises this principle both as to remedy and dose. All down the line of homeopathic literature, we will find many examples of this. We will mention a few. In 1867, Adolphe Lippe had a case chronic poisoning by cane sugar. In other words, a supersensitiveness to this substance. He removed it completely by Saccharum officinalis, Honeyman, month October 1867. A case of quininism cured by cinchona sulfuricum high, Organon, volume 3, page 208. The susceptibility to parsley can be cured by petrosalinum 30, says Dr. James W. Ward, one of the best and most careful observers. Asthma from eating scallops cured by pectin, which in a high potency cured permanently. Asthma due to susceptibility to the protein substances in eggs cured by repeated doses of egg white. Boric Materia Medica, page 491. I have personally cured many cases of hay fever due to the ragweed by Ambrosia artemisifolia in potency. The pharmaceutical houses today are making much capital out of pollen extracts of various hay fever producing plants. Right along this line of thought come such remedies as hydrophobinum for rabies, advocated in homeopathy when Pasteur was but 8 years old, anthracinum for anthrax, tuberculinum for tuberculosis, pertussin for whooping cough, etc. The hypersensitiveness to rust poisoning has been removed many times by the use of rust toxicodendron, and why it does not relieve in all cases is simply owing to difference in sensitiveness in different people and to the many varieties of plant. It has been clinically observed that allergic persons are less susceptible to contagious and infectious diseases. Ward. A study of epidemic remedies which physicians have often reported will be explained along similar paths. Also constitutional remedies, and it will be found that similia similibus curanta is the law of curative medicine. The chapter ends here. Thanks.